everyone. It's just a little bit after 1 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get going. Today we're going to have a general overview of SMMware, and it is divided up into 4 different parts. We're going to start off in this blue area where we walk through clients and sales leads, creating jobs, entering your hours and expenses, and invoices, a little bit about uploading files. And then we'll move on to the later sections, the green and the yellow, and finally talk about integrations. As we are going through the tour, feel free to ask questions as we go in the chat. All right. So here we are starting off on the home page, and we're going to go to the sales leads section. Our assumption is that someone has just now called you for the very first time, and you need to enter them into the system. If this was somebody you'd spoken to before, they would already be in the system, so you could pick them from this list. But our assumption today is that they are new. Oh, got to silence the phone. So you're going to enter them into the system. And what I'd like to point out here in particular is the idea of tracking who has referred this business to you. And instead of giving you a single field where you put that in, put the name of a person, we actually have 3 fields. We start off with a category. And then we go down to the company. And then down to the actual person. And then we have a referrals report, which then lets you answer questions like, where did our business come from in the 3rd quarter of last year? So you can filter based on category. This list is drawn up from your previous entries. And you can enter anything you want, but you'll be given a choice of previously existing entries to choose from. We also have an opportunity to have a client representative. Again, if they were already in the system, and maybe in the case of an attorney and you're dealing with a power of estate, they might already be in the system. You can add new ones. You can indicate what kind of relationship it is between the client representative and the client. So it could be attorney, adult, child, and so on. We have some custom fields here. These are going to be information about them as a person. It's probably a good time to talk about the 3 fundamental records in SMMware. We have a client record, we have a sales lead record, and a job record. So the client information is put into the client record, and it's all, the thinking is based on the assumption that you may do business with somebody more than once. So each time that they approach you about work, that is a different sales lead. And if you win the work, it becomes a job. And so one client record may have multiple sales leads attached to it, and there may also be multiple jobs. Some examples of how you might use the client custom fields. You can indicate if somebody has mobility issues, maybe they have a pet. So for instance, if you have workers who have cat allergies, and so you want to know when someone has a cat, that might be something you put under the client record. We also have the ability to, if you deal with certain addresses on a regular basis, like senior living centers, we can arrange to have them appear in this list. And then that will fill in the rest of the address for you. So you don't have to memorize the address. You don't have to cut and paste it into place. So again, we've started down the path of a sales lead, and we took a detour in order to create the client record. And now Tammy has been selected as the client. We are now back at our blank sales lead. A sales lead is going to have a status level, and you can customize these status levels as you like. This is what you get by default when you start a SMMware site. I'm going to pick in progress. We also have submitted, which means that you have given a quote to them and you're waiting to hear back. Then you can have won and declined. Sometimes things go on hold for a while, so you can have suspended. Sometimes somebody is calling you for a basic introduction to, you know, what do you do? What can you do for them? But they might be 6 months away from actually making a decision. So they can go under casual inquiry. Here under the sales lead, we have some automations. So the customer tells you, I'm going to make a decision on such and such a date. You put that date into the system. SMMware will create a task. It will assign it to whoever the lead salesperson is, which is indicated up here. The due date will match the customer's decision date. And the thinking is that SMMware is essentially going to tap you on the shoulder and say it's time to give them a call. When you submit a quote to them, you can put the date that you gave them the quote here. And then in this case, SMMware will create a task. It'll assign it to the lead salesperson. The due date, instead of matching the date that you enter here, in the settings editor, you're going to say that when this happens, you want the due date to be 1 week out or 2 weeks out or something like that. We also have some custom fields for the sales lead. You will see these exact same custom fields reflected in the job, because a sales lead and a job are more or less two sides of the same coin. For Mackenzie, the previous entries, did you mean for the client references? Maybe you can clarify that a little bit, exactly which entities we're talking about? Going back to our custom sales lead fields, this is information that is custom or specific to this opportunity. And so it could have an address, it could have a gate code. So if they move from one place to another place, this is all likely to change. Different elevator code, different garbage day. So for Mackenzie, when you're looking at the clients and the referred by fields, they are drawn from the previous entries. You can go to the referral report. And if there's a value here that you don't like, you can click on the client's name. It'll open up in a new tab. You can modify what you put here. So in the case of a value that you don't like, you can erase it or replace it with a different value. You save it. And then when you come back here, if you filter it again, that at that point in time, that entry you didn't like will be gone. So yeah, you can use that for filtering out the misspellings and so on. The idea is that as people start typing, they should then, instead of finishing the typing and risking misspelling, they're supposed to look at the drop-down list and pick from that ideally. Going back to our sales lead, we've got a status board. This makes its appearance on the home page. You can pick a tag. You can also define your own tags. Throughout SMMware, there are many places where you can define custom lists. You can also put in some default text. This is a common theme throughout SMMware. We try to give you a helping hand or like a head start, but we try not to lock you in. Just as we saw with the clients, you can have an address. And then when you pick the organization, it'll fill in the address for you. For Mackenzie, if there are really that many misspelled addresses, there's not like a mass command. Although I think that going to the referrals report and clicking it, you do have to address them one by one because there's just not really a way around that. But going to the referral report and clicking on the clients can get you directly to that client at least. So we're back here on our sales lead. We've saved it now. And we'll talk about quotes. Creating a quote within SMMware is a question of mixing and matching the various building blocks that we give you. There's a list of those blocks here. But then after you've been working with the system for a while, you're going to create some templates. And the next time you create a quote, you're going to use a template as a starting point instead of starting from scratch every time. So here we have one of our templates drawn up as this new sales quote. This is a client block. It pulls information about the clients. This is a header block. It's got larger, bold text, so as to visually break up the quote. We have some line items. The areas that are in gray are ones that you cannot directly enter. That information is either being calculated on the fly or pulled from somewhere else. So for instance, the subtotal is being calculated on the fly, so we're not going to have you directly enter that. It's going to be calculated for you. But the other areas you can go ahead and start modifying. Another block type is just a text block, a summary block that adds everything up. We have a legal block. Here you will also see the shortcuts for the e-signing. For e-signing, we partner with Sign Now, which is one of the industry leaders, much like DocuSign. And we have some shortcuts. Whenever you have a digital signature, you need to have a name and how you're going to contact them. And so you can directly then enter that information, but SMMware also offers you some shortcuts. So I can put in client instead of the name, and then SMMware will substitute in the name of the client. If you put email, it'll substitute in their email address, or the phone number, it'll substitute in that. And then the invitations to sign will go out via email or via text message, depending on whether you put email or phone here. Let me back up to the top of the page here. And I forgot to put an email address in for our new client, Tammy. Otherwise, I could have clicked on this email button and sent the quote to them as an attachment. Let's take a look at what that quote looks like as a PDF. You would have your own header image up here at the top, not just this generic SMMware one. But you can get a sense of what the client would see when you send them a PDF. Another thing that happens is that people will get your quote and then ask for revisions. For Amy, the e-signing, because we partner with Sign Now is in charge of making sure everything's legally enforceable, but of course they have a cost associated with them, and so then we have to pass that cost on as well. And you can purchase the e-signature requests. I'll go ahead and cover that in just a minute. I'll come back to it. I want to finish up with the quotes first, but I will answer your question. So you purchase packages of signature requests and then use them one at a time. So it's not a question of a monthly quota. And then Nikki, I believe that I've answered your question. For Jolene, if you, in the legal section, if you put in phone instead of email, then it's going to send them a text message with a link. They click on the link and it'll take them to the Sign Now website where they can go ahead and finish the signing of the quote. All right, so I believe I've caught up on our questions. So to take up where we left off, people ask you for revisions to quotes, and SMMware accounts for that. So we're going to copy our quote. We're going to save it. Now it's up here, it says quote number 2, where it used to say quote number 1. We also offer you a field called the quote version notes, and you'll note that it's marked as private. And here you can explain to your future self why you created this next version. So over time, let's say you have 3 or 4 different quote versions, you can review these notes in order to trace back through the process, why you had to create each one and what they wanted to change. This is the button for e-signing if you want to initiate e-signing. The next thing to talk about is the ways that SMMware allows you to charge your clients. We offer 2 basic approaches. The simplest approach it assumes that there's a single hourly rate for literally every single hour within the job. So that way, that's the simpler approach. It doesn't require any kind of setup. The other approach is using something called job codes. And a job code is simply the name for or label for what kind of work was being done at that moment and the rate that you want to charge. So in the settings editor, you would create your job codes. And then when you create the job, you'd indicate that you want to use the job codes. And then when the employees enter their time, they would specify which job code they wanted to use. All right, so I'm going to exit out of here. And I'm going to answer the earlier question about e-signing. And this is the subscription manager. This is where you can go in order to change the subscription level. You can also sign up for e-signing. And here's the packages that you can purchase. Obviously, as you purchase larger packages, the cost does go down. And you can set it up to auto-renew and so on. And while we're in the area, I'll go to the settings editor. I've been talking about this and that setting and things that you can customize. Each one of these bars is a section within, that has settings within it. And I can pop this open to see all the ones that are there. So the takeaway from this is that we have a fair number of sections, and each section has a bunch of settings within it. So there's a lot you can do to tweak SMMware and make it your own. So for Natalie, you cannot mix job codes and hourly in the same estimate. It is either one or the other. So for Jolene, yes, the Sign Now feature does have an additional fee associated with it. And as I said, that's just because Sign Now does charge us a fee, so they can be an ongoing business, and then we have to pass that along. All right, so we're back at our sales leads. I'm going to go back to the listing of sales leads. This gray bar here at the top is a filter. You have our filter button over here. You can usually see these gray filter boxes in all the listing pages, and most of them are going to have a date range. And then you go down, you can see the results down below. So if you need to edit something, you would just click on the name and you're back into that. While we're here, I wanted to talk about the file manager a little bit. And this is something that we will be releasing on this weekend. Do a new code launch this weekend. And what we're doing is we added the ability to drag and drop. And also you can set a tag. The idea is that you walk into a certain room, you take some photos, you upload them, and you tag them for that room. So we can also rename the photos. So if I choose bedroom 4, it's going to generate names like bedroom 4001, bedroom 4002, and so on. All right, so we've uploaded our photos. We're also about to release something where you can upload photos or take photos from your phone and have them directly go to SMMware. This is in response to some people who, just a moment, let me go ahead and pause this for a second. I'm going to resize it as well. So what you're looking at here, I have software that allows me to share my phone with the desktop, and I recorded that ahead of time. And what we're looking at is a job. I'm going to go ahead and let it play. And we're going to scroll down to the file manager. So what you're seeing is me actually doing things on the phone, but I'm going to use the mouse to indicate things. You can see the camera icon. I'm going to click on that. It allows me to take a photograph. Then I can click on Use Photo, and then SMMware is going to upload it. And there it is. And then we're going to just show that a couple more times. So for Jolene from the photo app, I mean, once the photographs exist on a hard drive, you can upload them from there into SMMware. And I haven't used the Max Photo app. I assume that the photographs are stored on the local hard drive. For Amy, we do technically have a limit just because everything in computers needs to have some sort of limit. But the for those people who have reached that limit, we have always just increased it, because it's not really intended to limit you. It's just to make sure that it's like, you know, hacker proofing things. You know, you never want to leave things completely open-ended. So for all practical purposes, there is not a limit. I would mention that the photographs are being downsized as they are uploaded, and the photograph quality that you see has always been perfectly fine for everyone that we've spoken to. And instead of having three and 5 megabyte photographs, and then when you're out in the field you have to download them in order to look at them, these download that much quicker. So it really just saves you a lot of time. For Jane, the ordering of the list is by the tags with untagged at the top, and then after that it's alphabetical. You can filter the listing based on the tags. So you can say, show me only the bedroom 3 photos or the attic photos and so on. And then for Jane, I would be curious to know why you want the latest photos at the top. And I'm thinking in terms of people who come back later and want to find the photographs, unless they know, they have to be familiar with when the photograph was taken in order for that to be a convenient way for people to find them. Whereas the tagging, people probably know that they want a picture that's from the bedroom. They know that they want a picture from the basement. So that seems like a quick way to find them, but I'm open to hearing suggestions. For Natalie, you can drag and drop the binary documents as well as the photos. When I say binary documents, I'm referring to Word documents, Excel files, PDFs. For Nikki, there's not currently a way to filter by file type. Again, we're open to hearing suggestions on what people are looking for. And SMMware has been built on the idea of getting feedback from our clients and then trying to get a sense of what the majority are looking for, what's the most important, and then those things get implemented into the software. So we do welcome feedback and suggestions. For Debbie, you can create your own tags. These tags are not set, and some people do create before and after tags as well. So that way, when you want to see all the before tags, you can filter for that, and same for filtering by the after tags. All right, I believe that I am caught up on the questions, so we're going to move along. So we were talking about sales leads. We go back to the listing. I wanted to point out that we also have a bit of a sales report here, all the different status levels that you have in the system. It will show you how many, what quantity you have in the system, the total dollar value, and the total hours worked. It will also break that information down as a percentage. And whatever you have up here in the filter affects not just the listing down below, but also the results in this sales report. From here, I'm going to jump over to look at jobs. For Amy, there is a 1 tag per photo. So we're looking at jobs. I'll go ahead and open one up for editing. And the biggest point here is that it looks very much like the sales lead, which I had mentioned before. These custom fields that you see here are the same one we saw in the sales lead. And when you create a job from a sales lead, all that information carries over. Of course, there are a few differences. Instead of having a lead salesperson, we have a team lead. Instead of having the sales lead status, we have a job status, things like that. It tells you how many hours were quoted versus how many hours have been put towards it so far. Here we're on the job. We can, in this job profile, we can associate, or we can assign some associates. Within SMMware, the users, the workers, we don't call them employees because that's kind of a loaded term, whereas associates is more, because employees implies maybe 40 hours a week, or it means that to some people. Other people have a different interpretation of it. And we're just trying to say people who can log in as, users and associates. And when you assign an associate to a job, that affects communications so that they can get notified when tasks are created or modified, things like that. You can also associate an organization. And within SMMware, for now, you can think of an organization as a vendor. There's a little bit of a nuance to that, but we'll come back to that. But for now, think of it as a vendor. So you can assign a moving company or a lawyer or a real estate agent. And then when we go to look at the profile for that vendor, you can see all the different jobs that they were assigned to. So you have a sense of how much business you've sent to this organization or that organization. So here under the job, we have the file managers, just like we saw under the sales lead. I should point out that there are 2 different file managers. We could have had a single list of files, and we could have had you go one by one and say, well, this is a sensitive file, this is a not sensitive file. So an example of a sensitive file might be if you choose not to use our quoting system or the e-signing, and you have people physically sign the quotes and then you scan it, and you want a place to put it in SMMware, the restricted file manager is where that might go, so that salespeople and administrators can see it, but not everybody in the entire company can see that kind of information. The file manager is a place where you might want to put all the photos from the house, things like that. So for Jackie, what you're talking about is what SMMware would have for that are the tasks. So you can have task groups. So you can use that as a project management tool. So the other sections here, you can see who the event leads are for this job. Within a job, you can have a team lead, and they're in charge of the job as a whole. But on any given day when you're visiting the clients, you might have somebody who's in charge, and that would be considered an event lead. You can also create notes. You can log that call came in, and you can see the previous jobs for the client. You can see the invoices that are related to this job, various other information. So from here, I'm going to look at the associates. We're going to be talking about entering your hours and expenses. But before I do that, I'm going to touch on the associate profiles, just look at a couple of things there. You can enter somebody's portrait, and when SMMware notifies the client that, hey, we have this appointment coming up, it can include the photo of the event lead. That way the client feels comfortable opening the door when your crew shows up. You have a half dozen people standing at your door, and you want to be sure it's the right people before you let them in. Another aspect we want to point out here is the idea of pay levels. SMMware has 2 different approaches to handling pay, how you pay your workers. There is a simple approach, and it is capable of distinguishing between weekdays and weekends, and whether they're acting as a team lead or if they're a team lead on the weekend. And you can assign different pay levels, and they can receive different pay rates for each one of those. So that's the simple approach. You can define your own pay levels. So this is the list of available pay levels. But you can define it however you want. And the other approach that we have for pay levels is to tie them to the job codes. And that allows you to get really fine-grained with doing that. So for instance, if you have people who are specialists, an example of that would be somebody who handles floor planning. They took the time to learn the floor planning software, and maybe they just happen to be talented at it. So you pay them a little bit more for that kind of work. You can create a pay level called floor planning, and then you would assign that only to the person that it applies to, and you can give them whatever rate you choose. I'd also mention that when the employees are entering their hours, they do not see the rates for the job codes what you're going to charge the client, and their pay level is also not going to be visible within that area. The next thing to point out here is the permissions section. SMMware has a variety of permissions you can assign to tweak what people are able to do. First of all, we have an overarching master level from normal user through company owner. And whenever one of these more granular permissions does not apply, then SMMware will fall back on using their overall permission level as the guide. For Natalie, no, you're not able to mix the different pay levels within the estimate. So you are either using the job codes or you're not using the job codes. But when you use job codes, it's almost like a superset of the hourly rate. So it's kind of like embedded within there, so you can have that as well. So I don't think that job codes is a limiting factor. It actually expands what you can do. A few examples of the permissions we have here is the sales role permission, so that people can see the sales entry in the main menu and see the individual entries, the individual sales leads. So you can have no access, read, write, access, read, access. HR refers to whether people have access to create new associates to see how much they're being paid. Within scheduling, this refers to the master calendar. Each worker has a calendar on their homepage, which only covers their own events, but then there's a master calendar. So there's other permissions for whether they have access to jobs and clients, managing flat fees, or the vendors, which is the organizations and contacts, and so on. And we also have a section to help you with your HR tasks. You can upload files here as well, and you have to have HR permissions in order to see any of this. Even the worker whose profile this is would not see this section unless they themselves had HR permissions. All right, so that is the associate profile. I'm going to jump over and look at what it's like to enter your hours. This is the drop down of workers, and I can manage hours on behalf of any one of them because I'm an administrator. If I was an entry level user, I just wouldn't have this drop down. SMMware has a couple of different ways of handling getting your hours into the system. What we're looking at right now is assuming that it's the end of the day. I'm going back to the third. And let's say you worked from 9 to 3. So now you're going to enter that in the system. Also, SMMware allows you to have shortcuts. So if I just typed 3P, SMMware understands that that means 3 p.m. You don't necessarily have to type out the whole thing. You can put in a break hour. You do naturally have to tell SMMware which job the work was done for. And if that job uses job codes, then you have to pick the job code. SMMware also includes a formula for how you can charge clients or pay employees for travel based on distance. And that formula allows you to say how many miles are free, and then how much each mile after that is going to either get paid to the employee or charged to the client. Here we have a description, and you can either type something out or you can pick from this list. And again, you can redefine that list as you like. You can, if you worked in one job in the morning and one job in the afternoon, you can take care of both those entries in one go. You don't have to do one and then kind of rinse and repeat. This area at the top is where you create new entries. The area at the bottom is where you can see the existing entries, so you can edit and delete them. We have an approval system, which is optional, and it's turned on for this particular system. So this entry has been approved, so now it's just viewable. It's no longer editable unless you decide to unlock it as the person who approved it. In addition to this approach, where you're assuming it's the end of the day and you're kind of entering the hours after they've happened, we also have a time clock. So you pick the job, you can put in the description, then you have a big old start button. You come back at the end of the day and you can click on the stop. I'm going to move along and look at expenses. And here we once again need to put in the date that the work was done. We have to pick the job. In this case, we have to put in amounts. Here's the list of vendors that you might have spent the money with. Once again, we have a description. You can either hand type it or just use one of the presets. And then down below, we've got billable or not. I didn't point it out before, but when we're entering the hours, you also have the option of marking it as billable or not. These radio buttons, the company and reimbursable, they refer to not whether you are going to be reimbursed by the clients. That's what billable does. But the radio buttons refer to whether your worker paid out of pocket so that they need to be reimbursed. Or if they use a company credit card, then they do not. You can also take a photograph of the receipt and have that uploaded to SMMware associated with the expense. Once again, we have the same idea where the new entries are at the top and the list of existing entries is down below. Next, I'm going to jump over to the invoice manager. So we're looking at a listing of invoices. We've got a gray filter bar and various criteria, such as the date range. I'm going to jump down to one of these. SMMware has status levels that are assigned to an invoice. Preliminary is a way of telling other people in the company that it's not finished so that they don't accidentally send it to the client. We have an optional approval system, the thinking being that the team lead knows most closely about which workers did what and when. So then we allow them to approve the invoice. And so what we would do is mark it as finalized. The team lead would see that they have to review it. They would mark it as approved. And then after that, we can mark it as being sent to the client or paid. Once it has been approved, then we have these buttons for looking at PDFs. We offer you 3 different formats for the PDFs, and you can pick from any format at any time. We have the summary format. The thinking here is that some clients, the more detail they see, the longer the conversation is going to be before they finally are okay with it. And then, so the summary version can maybe shorten that conversation. The detailed version will have entries for each employee for each day they worked. So if you had 4 employees on site on a given day, there will be 4 entries, all with the same date, 1 for each employee. So for some clients, when they see all this detail, then they feel comfortable that yes, the grand total makes sense because they can see all the stuff that was done. So that makes, we're trying to shorten the conversation. Then we have the roll-up format where if the invoice, let's say the detailed invoice starts to get too long, we can roll it up into a given date. So instead of having 4 entries for a given date, it'll just have 1 and it'll say that there were 4 employees there. Coming back to the main page, we have a note that you can write that the client will see. This one is a private note, and so this is something that the client does not see. Also, you can find yourself in situations where you have to send the invoice either, sometimes you send it to the old address where they're moving from, sometimes you have to send it where it's moving to. So we give you a list of addresses that are relevant to pick from at a given moment. And if there is a client representative, that address can appear among that list. You can also override who's considered to be paying it. So if sometimes there's a senior living center that helps out and they like to see their name as the payor, and you can do that. Down below, you can see the line items, the date they were worked, who did the work, their description, and so on. All right, so that brings us to the end of what I consider the first part of the tour. That was actually the longest part. From here, we're going to jump over to the resources section. I mentioned before the idea that we have organizations and contacts, and its vendors are among them. But the idea is that organizations are the companies, contacts are the people who work at those companies. And within the organization's listing, we have categories. So you can come down and say, well, I just want to see who my home improvement people are. And you get that list right there. And this list is a mixture of 3 different kinds of records. The traditional vendor, where you spend money with them and you need to indicate that they're the vendor when you make expenses, enter expenses into the system. Another kind of record you might find here is where we just were. Let's say that we recommend a home improvement person, even if we don't spend money with them, but we want them in the system so that when a client asks who's good at this particular kind of work, you can have a list of people to recommend. The third kind of record here would be people that refer business to you. And community CCRCs is a common one for move managers. And so these are people that send business to you, even if you don't spend money with them the way you do with a normal vendor. Let's see, we'll go to, so this is an organization where I know they have at least the one contact. So here's where you have the contacts. There could be a whole list of them here. I'd also like to point out that the organization record has a file manager so that you can upload files. Could be, again, be images or PDFs, Word docs, Excel files. And a common application here is that a moving company has a certificate of insurance and you need a place to put it. And then you also create a task to remind yourself to get a new certificate when you know that the old one is going to expire. You can also write notes. I mentioned before when we're looking at jobs that you can assign an organization to that job. And then here's where you can see all the jobs that this particular organization was involved with. So we're going to jump over to the contact record just to take a quick peek there. And what I'd like to point out here is the date of last contact and whether they refer clients to you. That is information that we use elsewhere in the system to help you keep in touch with the people who are sending you business, which of course is very important. And once again, we can upload files, create tasks, write notes, and log calls that are for this contact. All right, and that's everything that I wanted to say about the contacts and organizations for the moment. Next, we're going to talk about the tasks, notes, and calls in more detail. We're going to start off in a job. We'll go look at there. As you've seen, there are various places where you can create tasks and write notes, jobs being one of them. And you can, this is a list of tasks that have already been created, and you can modify them from here. You can also, if you need to go into more detail, you can pull up the entire record to make those changes. When we look at a task, it has a due date. It has 2 reminder dates that you can assign to it. We have a priority and a status. We have a summary. And then let's talk about which workers are responsible for it. Simmer's idea is that if you simply have a list of people assigned to a task, then nobody's really in charge because everybody's in charge. What we do is we have a primary assignee right here, and then we have the opportunity to have secondary assignees. So that way it's clear that this person has the most responsibility for getting it done, but other people can jump in, let's say if this person is out sick for the day or something like that. And then we have an optional notes section. And then after you've been working with the system for a while and you realize that you're creating the same kinds of tasks from one job to the next, as you go through different phases of the job, we offer you what are called task groups so that you can create a bunch of tasks at a time. What we're looking at here is 1, 2, 3 different tasks. And you can get rid of a task that you don't need. You can see that some of the information is pre-filled for you. That comes from the settings editor. Next, let's take a look at notes. Notes are fairly simple. You just have the summary, and then you have the body of it. And you can have some preset text. The idea here is that you're telling somebody what kind of information you want to collect at this stage of the game. And you can have different presets for jobs compared to the notes that go under the client, or notes that go under the vendors, and so on. Next, we'll talk about the calls, so that you can log a call came in. In this case, we want to track whether we are calling them or if they're calling you, and we need a phone number. It's similar to tasks in some ways, but it's has its differences. We have the primary and secondary assignees again. And then from here, I'm going to jump to the home page. I'm just going to double back for a second for Natalie. I would be interested in, maybe not right now during the demo, but I'd be interested in understanding why you would want to mix the different kinds of pay levels or different kinds of client charges. You know, like what is the underlying need that you're trying to address for doing that? So again, maybe that might be a conversation for later, but I am curious to know. Anyway, back to our tour. We're here on the home page. When we're looking at the job, I talked about status board, and then you can see the gathering of all that information under this section. This is your 30,000-foot view of how things are going across all the different jobs in your company, and you can modify it from here. The tags are customizable. We have these as a default, but you can have more tags, different colors, different labels, whatever you like. And the idea here is that alert is something that needs immediate attention. Flag is something that is not urgent, but still needs attention. And good, of course, is something that you don't have to worry about because everything's going great. So the idea is at the end of the day, if you scroll through this list, ideally everything would be green, but if not, at least you know what you have to look into. And then of course you can modify the note as well from here. The thinking is that you go through this list and make any changes. You can use this refresh button to refresh the list to reflect your changes. We don't reflow the list as we go because then you might get mixed up about whether you've addressed a given item. So we also have a status board for sales. It is more or less the same idea, except that it applies to your sales leads. They also had an area where you could put in a status board note and pick a status board tag. And again, you can customize these tags, but by default, you get cold lead, medium lead, hot lead. The task center is where you can keep in touch with everything going on across the company regarding tasks. By default, it's going to show me the list of my tasks. These are tasks that are assigned to me. And I can also look at my secondary tasks. That is a task where you're assigned to it in the secondary role. And we separate those two lists because once again, you have more responsibility when you are the primary assignee compared to when you are the secondary. If you create a task and assign it to somebody else, that's called delegation. And so I can see all the lists of tasks that I've created and assigned to someone else. That way I can see if they're keeping up. If I am a higher level user, then I can see across the entire company all the unfinished tasks and the recently finished tasks. And we also have the call center, which is the same idea as the task center. I mentioned before the idea that we have an optional approval system. And if I'm the team lead on a job, then you might see an entry here for that job, and it'll tell me that there's some items that need to be approved. If I'm the person who created the entry and my entry was rejected, it will appear here. I can jump over to edit that and resubmit it to the system. They will see a reason why it was rejected when they go to do that. Next, we have a list of teams where you're the team lead, a list of teams where you're the team member. We separate those because, again, when you are the team lead, you have more responsibility. I mentioned under the contacts, we marked them as being someone who sends business to you, and we take note of the date of last contact. And between those two pieces of information, we draw up this list. This is a list of people that send you business, and it's been the longest since you've spoken to them. So in your ideal world, you would come here and all these dates would be very recent. And so you have their phone number and their telephone. You can get in touch with them, and then you can modify things, update them from here. And again, you're going to go through the list, and then you can reflow it in order to have it reflect your changes. So now we're going to get into scheduling, and this is my schedule. These are only items, not company-wide, but only items that I'm an attendee for, or maybe the main contact. This section for invites is when an event is created using invites, then that invite would appear here, and I can respond to it and say, yes, I'd like to be part of it, or no, I can't be part of it. And you can modify that up until the time that it is assigned. So now I'm going to jump over to the master calendar. At the bottom, we have tags. We have, I think it was 28 tags that you can pick from. And you can assign the label, and you can put in the color, the background color, and the text color. So the thinking here is that you should be able to look at your calendar and tell something about an event by using color. And the three different basic ways I've seen people use these tags, the simplest approach is to distinguish between a job-related event versus a sales-related event. Within SMMware speak, these are events, as opposed to the terminology that sometimes gets kicked around. So we can see that purple is packing, dark green is unpacking. We can see that here's a packing event, here's a unpacking event. So this approach is the idea of defining tags based on the kind of work being done that day. And it makes the most sense when you're really concentrating on one kind of work. If you're doing a hodgepodge of things, then that approach may not work for you. You may want to just leave it with job and sales. Another approach is to say who's in charge. So you can create tags that match your event leads. And so that way we can see that this is Judy that's in charge of this event, and Carmen's in charge of that event. When we click on these, well, before we click on them, we can see the time range, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. We can see the name of the client. Where it says who, these are the initials of the workers who are going to be there. When I click on that, I can see their full names for the workers, as well as the time range they're going to be there. I can jump over to the job profile, and this is where you can see information about client confirmations. I'm going to address that a little bit more in a moment. There's a map link here. So then SMMware is essentially handing you off to your phone's mapping function, the default mapping function, and you can get your turn-by-turn directions from there. I'm going to go ahead and create a new event. So I'm just click on the date. I'm going to pick what kind of tag I want to use. And since I chose job, naturally SMMware wants to know which particular job is involved. Pick that one. I also point out that if you have a sales lead with the number of hours quoted, then SMMware is going to tell you both how many hours have already been used and how many hours used, quoted hours, and the hours remaining. So that way you can use SMMware to avoid going over hours without noticing. And we have some predefined text here. Again, the idea is that you can tell people what kind of information you are expecting them to collect as you go. When we're looking at the main map view, I pointed out the map link. And this is how you create one. Here we have an icon of a house with an arrow pointing out of it. So that's the move from address. Here we have an arrow pointing into the house. So that's where they're moving to. I click on that and it generates the short code. And all you really want to do is leave that alone. Once we go back to the main view, that is translated into the map link. So here we have the ability to skip the notifications that would normally go to the attendees, your workers, or skip the client notifications that would normally go out. This is where we can put in reminders that go out to the attendees, your workers, and also reminders for the client. And that brings us down to the question of who's going to do the work and how we manage that. SMMware has 3 different approaches, and each one has its own underlying thinking. The direct approach has an assumption that you have already spoken either in a company meeting or on the drive home for how the work is going to be done. So you pick people, and their notification is just going to say you are assigned, because that is the underlying assumption for this approach. The next approach is called invites, and we're going to put in the team size. We're also going to put in a date regarding when you expect people to respond by. The respond by date is not really hard-coded into the system. It's just a nudge. And there's different ways you can use the invites. You can invite 5 people, 4 of them say they want to do it, and then you pick your 3. Because again, this is a business event, so you're more precise about exactly how many people are assigned, as opposed to a social event. And then you can also use that as a first come, first serve functionality, or you can go through multiple rounds of invitations until your team is filled. So there's a few different ways you can use the invite system. And lastly, we have the availability-based approach. And this is our fanciest one. The employees would first put in their unavailability. So they can go out into a given week and say, well, I can't work Monday morning, I can't work Friday morning. And when we go back to this view, with that information already in the system, we have a timeline across the top. We have a list of workers down the left. And then these green bars mean that they're available. And somebody might just have a chunk of the bar missing if they were not, in fact, available, if they marked it off within the unavailability section. So here we can assign shifts. And like I said, this is our fanciest approach. You can have people arriving and leaving at different times. The notifications for events, they go out as emails and text messages. Go ahead and save that. We also offer you some tools to help you with your planning. We have the availability table. In this case, we have a date across the top and employees down the left. And you can see going out 12 weeks who's available when. And on any given day, if there's a colored area, that means they're already part of a job. The other date ranges that you see here mean that they are available and could work that. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is integrations. We can integrate with Google Calendar, QuickBooks Desktop, and QuickBooks Online. If you're familiar with MailChimp, we can integrate with them as well directly. And then we also offer integrations with Zapier, who is kind of a middleman. So there's so many software packages in the world. The idea that SMMware would learn to talk directly to all of them would just not be practical. So there's kind of a universal translator program called Zapier. So SMMware will tell Zapier, hey, there's a new client. And then Zapier can tell some program like Constant Contact to add them to their list. Last thing to talk about is just how people go about signing up for SMMware and what the pricing is. We have different pricing levels based on how many active users you're going to have in the system, ranging all the way from 3 users and going up from there. And you'll see that the price increases for higher level users is very modest. Every SMMware site has a prefix. The demo I just did for you is under demo.smmware.com. And you could pick a prefix that is an abbreviation for your company name. We also have the first 30 days free. There's no annual commitment. And then the last thing to talk about is training. From within SMMware, you have the help pages, which are context sensitive. So I'm managing schedules, so the help comes up for managing schedules. And then we also have YouTube videos. So we have a channel. You just go to youtube.com/SMMware. And you'll find about 30 videos here. Online, we also have manuals. One manual for administrators, another for team leads, and another for team members. And then lastly, if you want the personal touch for learning more about SMMware, we have Liz Donovan, who is our accredited trainer. I've always gotten great feedback about Liz. Her information is here on the webinar and training page. So you have her phone number and email there. There's Liz here in the chat. Hello, Liz. So that covers how you can learn about SMMware, everything from the self-serve of help and manuals and YouTubes, all the way through the, as I said, the personal touch. So we're right around our finishing time, and I don't want to keep you late. So I'm going to finish up here. I will stick around for any questions if people have some. If you have questions that come up later, of course, you can contact me. I'd be happy to talk about it. But thank you very much for joining me here today. I hope you found something of use in this conversation, something of interest. And like I said, thanks again for joining me. And I hope that everybody has a great day. For Amy, so for logging administrative time, what we typically do is create kind of a pseudo client, which is your company name. And then you can create a job for that. And then people can assign all that administrative time to that. When you define a job, you can specify a job type. So you can create a job type that's just called administrative. And then you can have people assign administrative time to the administrative job for your pseudo client, your company's record. Jolene, thank you very much. Thanks for joining me. All right, so unless there are any more questions, I guess we're going to sign off. Again, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you have a great rest of the day. Bye now.